This week on the Pennsylvania School Safety Hour, we've traveled to State College to visit with Dr. Max Crowley, Director of the Edna Bennett Pierce Prevention Research Center. The center's researchers develop, implement, and evaluate interventions focused on promoting human flourishing in terms of mindfulness, compassion, and resilience, in the service of supporting educational communities. And Lycoming County District Attorney Tom Marino will be here in full view with a special guest from his office. Thanks for joining us today on the Pennsylvania School Safety Hour. An important area of research focusing on child development and wellness is being done here at the Prevention Research Center. Program producer Eric Porterfield recently had the chance to sit down with Dr. Crowley and learn more about the work being done at the center. Work that contributes to better understanding what schools can do to become better informed regarding issues that can drive behaviors that can compromise students and staff's safety. Here is the first installment of that conversation.
Let's first learn a little bit about Max Crowley, or do you want to go by Dr. Crowley?
Max is fine.
Max,
yeah.
Great. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you arrived at Penn State.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I am an alum of Penn State, and I then left, and I was at Duke University previously. Also spent some time with the Administration of Children and Families at the federal level, and then had the opportunity to come back to Penn State with my family as a faculty member here at the Prevention Research Center and in the College of Health and Human Development. And it's really one of the best places in the country, probably the world, doing work around prevention science, sort of the science of how we invest and support children and families. And so that's what really brought me back.
And when you came back, Edna Bennett Pierce had funded a chair, which you now occupy.
That's right. Yep. Yeah. So Edna Bennett Pierce and the Bennett family were huge supporters in the founding 25 years ago of the Prevention Research Center. We actually just celebrated our 25th anniversary, and the founding director, Mark Greenberg, was the first to hold that chair. And then we've had a number of directors since Mark first founded the center. And so now I've recently, a year ago, stepped into the role. And so really happy to be kind of carrying on the legacy of the center of working in both in the scientific study of prevention, but also supporting amazing projects that our faculty and staff lead all around the Commonwealth, all around the country, doing incredible prevention work.
So was the fact that that work was being done here or funded here, maybe more importantly, how important was that in your decision to leave Duke, which is a great
Yep, Duke's a wonderful place. It was huge, honestly, and it's been a huge part of keeping me, honestly, at Penn State, is the incredible environment, right, and scholars. It's really the people. And yes, we're very successful in getting federal funds and working with the Commonwealth and working with different municipalities and localities. But really, right, it comes down to an incredible community of folks who've dedicated their lives to studying children and families, studying how we make meaningful investments to keep kids safe, right? To help them achieve their goals, to help build a more flourishing society.
Edna Bennett Pierce, she said, "You can change the world one little child at a time." It really speaks to the kind of person she was. Did you know her? What was she like?
Absolutely. I actually knew her when I was a student. She had, when we came back, she had the opportunity to meet my son, and we had time to spend time with her and Bud. She was an incredible woman, and we were so fortunate to have someone who gave such a transformative gift to Penn State to start the center, but also was with the center through that first 2 decades, really being involved, talking about what the next direction was with the directors, and hearing about what we were discovering, what we were learning. So she was really our fairy godmother, is what Mark used to call her. Actually, right outside my office here, have a wand on the wall that was originally given to her, and then the family gave back to us, which was sort of commemorating just the incredible role that she played in transforming not only the science but how we help people.
It's really interesting to me that it takes philanthropy sometimes to do what maybe others should be focusing on. Is that fairly common in the sciences, in prevention science in particular?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, like, Edna's gift was absolutely transformative, especially for the time, and the legacy of that continues. And I think that I would say that yes, like, to have that vision to support something in perpetuity is something that really only philanthropy has the ability to do. Right? We are very fortunate to receive support and compete successfully for support from traditional science funders and for funders that provide support services, but that doesn't necessarily have the sort of the vision and time scale that the type of philanthropy that Edna was involved in. And we're really unique as a center, as a prevention center, not only here at Penn State, but really around the country, to have the level of support that we have because of her and her family.
So how would you define prevention science as it relates to the work that you guys do here?
Yeah, definitely. So the Prevention Center here was really part of a transformative moment in the conceptualization of what prevention even is in the country. And it was a modernization of the idea of prevention from, the early days. People often talk about the Ben Franklin quote of, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And that spirit still lives on. But the idea is that there's actually scientific inquiry that can go into understanding whether or not we successfully prevented something. When you do a drug treatment trial, right, and you give a drug to two different groups in a clinical trial, whether or not, you made the person who was sick better. But when we're talking about prevention, especially the type of prevention that we specialize in, we're talking about preventing something from ever happening. And so proving that you kept something from happening is actually a different endeavor. And so for us, the prevention that we do, the kind of common idea of what prevention science is today, is really about this idea that there are underlying risk and protective factors that lead to many of the outcomes we as society want to prevent. Substance use, violence, child maltreatment, educational problems, right? And there are these fundamental sociologic as well as behavioral risk and protective factors, and biologic, that if we attend to, we can actually prevent many of these phenomena, these problems, these societal issues from happening in the first place. So that's really how we often characterize prevention science here at the center, is that that if we understand the risks, we understand what keeps things from happening, the protective factors, we can actually understand how to prevent something from ever happening at all.
School safety is obviously related to children. How difficult does it make the work that you do evidence to parents, teachers, administrators, with a marketplace that is $4 billion that has become much more predominant and prevalent as it relates to funds, what people think about in terms of school safety?
Well, I mean, I think, the burden of protecting children, keeping kids safe at school, really falls to everyone, but no more so than the teachers and the administrators in schools. And we can't forget about that. We also have to realize the incredible pressures, right, that these schools have, and the people in those schools have. In addition to keeping kids safe, they also have a mission to educate them. And for us, we've been very fortunate to have some long-term partnerships with schools and school districts around the country who have been part of studies, been part of service delivery, been part of the coalitions of preventionists that we've sought to build around the U.S. And so this is not an easy sort of task, right? People think that there are sort of magic solutions to keeping kids safe at school, but there's lots of ways that kids can be unsafe, right? And the process of actually securing a space, not only from a physical standpoint, but a psychological and emotional, so that kids can be successful in why they're there, to learn, to become educated, is complex. And it requires a a systematic effort that brings together different stakeholder groups, not only the teachers and the principals, but members of the community, law enforcement, and faith leaders, nonprofits. They all have a role to play in how we as a community keep kids safe.
So how do you engage these communities? That's really the challenge in some ways, because I feel like in many ways they are afraid of making the wrong decision.
Yeah, I think that it's absolutely understandable that many communities almost feel paralysis or even a decision fatigue on what to do, right, in these situations. When we see the headlines, we see what happens, we see the risks that are in play, but the reality is that schools, where we have our children be, the spaces we make for them, are a reflection of our communities, and so many in the communities recognize that we have to take ownership of the spaces in which we're sending our kids and entrusting our kids. And so one of the things that for a long time the Prevention Center has worked in is this idea that we can actually bring together disparate folks from different areas, different sectors, right, together to try to solve these sticky problems of prevention. One of those is in the school context. We have incredible scientists here at the center who've been leading work in this area: Janet Welsh, Sarah Chalinsky, Joshua Gales. We also have what's known as EPIS, right, which is our evidence support system supported by the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency, that is providing technical assistance on how to bring together communities to be able to put in place evidence-based solutions to support schools, to support a variety of different things that happen in schools. And through their incredible work, right, they've touched pretty much every community in the Commonwealth, as well as their models and their approaches have been used in states around the country. And I think that that's something that that folks who aren't sort of deeply enmeshed in this may not understand, is that there's a science to how we not only keep kids safe in school, but how we build the community support and infrastructure that's needed to support those schools.
Governor Schweiker was the first person to provide the funding for what became, I believe, EPIS, right? And their office was in Harrisburg, right across the street from the Capitol. Dr. Greenberg said in an interview I saw with you guys. Policy is, that says to me, policy is clearly a part of what the work that needs to be done is.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. One of the things that we've learned over the quarter of a century here at the Prevention Center is that, yes, we need to intervene and support children and their families, right? We also have to support teachers and administrators in the schools. We also have to support other aspects of the community, right? The groups where children and families live. And this is all based on a scientific theory known as the ecological systems model, right? Not to get too technical, but there is a science recognizing that we're not just alone on an island, right? We're surrounded by our families, our communities, right? And the country that we live in, the world, right? And that there are lots of different levers that need to be considered. And one of those levers is local policymaking, right? State policymaking, federal policymaking. These play a role, an important role in the lives of children and families. And so we here at the Prevention Center recognize that. And our community coalitions often involve local leaders, but increasingly we work with state leaders and even federal leaders to think about, how do we use the science to make better policy that is more effective, policy that uses public resources more efficiently? How do we put those resources towards kids at the right time and the right way to keep them safe?
So that involves economies too, and I know that that's an area of interest of yours as well. How does that play into that issue of policy and what we fund?
Yeah, definitely. I think that the reality is that, many of us feel like there is no amount of resources that we wouldn't want to spend to keep our own kids safe, right? Or to keep kids in general safe. But the reality is that there are not unlimited resources available. And there's also many things competing for those resources. And so one of the things that we've done at the Prevention Research Center, one of the things that my team, as well as my colleagues, such as Damon Jones here at the center, has thought a lot about is, so how do we make sure that prevention and programs that help kids and families are being considered considered with the same type of information, the same type of evidence, right? That, for instance, when the state's trying to make a decision to build a new bridge, right, or a new bypass, or or some other aspect of infrastructure, how do we show, right, from a fiscal standpoint, that investment in children and families actually not only leads to that kid being safer, that kid having a better life, but also how they're going to grow up and they're going to contribute to their community. They're going to become an employer themselves. They're going to be able to pay their taxes. They're not going to be reliant on different types of social services. How do we show the entire lifespan, right? The time course that a person lives in when you support them when they're young, right? And so that's something that's been really important and a real hallmark of the work here at the center for a while now.
Yeah, and I've had a chance to talk to some of the researchers and professors here, and it's a fascinating group because some of the study that you do and evidence-based work focuses on things like sports, nutrition, after-school activities. These are things that we're seeing have somewhat of a diminished role because of the funding. We're down big numbers in PIAA sports in Pennsylvania. These things are contributors, according to these folks.
That's right. These things are important, right? Where kids can go and not only be safe, which is really the baseline, but flourish, right? And build the skills they need to be successful when they grow up in the workforce, to be good parents themselves, right? To be civically engaged, be good members of their community, right? They learn these, right, through sport. They learn these through their extracurricular activities. They learn these in the classroom. And when those spaces aren't available, when those spaces aren't safe, right, then what we see is a loss, a lifelong deficit, right? And as we think about the next generation who's going to come along and help, steward and move forward our society, move forward our communities, take care of ourselves when we're older, right? We're really not doing ourselves any favors when we don't dedicate the time and effort and resources to making sure those safe spaces are available.
So the healthcare market, it began to sanction its own behaviors when it was basically taken over by corporate America insurers, large companies. What that did was it created formularies and efficiencies that hopefully fed safety as well. Are we looking at the same kind of model needing to be in place with school safety? Right now, the marketplace is unregulated. We don't have an FDA in school safety. So there's no way to check on whether there's evidence, let alone any real benefit to the tools.
Yeah, I think that the education space it's not a complete corollary to, for instance, the healthcare market. But I think you're right that we can learn some things, good and bad, right, from that space as we apply it, as we think about education moving forward. And there's one incredible resource known as the What Works Clearinghouse, which the Department of Education provides, which does provide a listing of what programs have evidence, right? And a variety of different types of programs for schools. And so schools can go and see that. We also at the center operate something that's known as the Results First Clearinghouse. This is a clearinghouse that brings in information from the federal What Works Clearinghouse for schools, but also a whole host of other lists and databases that helps make sense of, well, what programs do work, right? What are evidence-based solutions? So to that, right, the evidence is actually there, and right, there is availability. Where the sort of analogy breaks down is like there isn't the accountability around how we, in the same way, around using the things that works, right? And that's sort of, I think, one of the missed opportunities that a lot of schools are looking at closer. So how do we make sure that schools are spending their limited resources, districts are spending their limited resources on things that work, right? And how do they make sure that they're meeting their student bodies, their communities where they are? And as we sort of see this information kind of become increasingly available, we do see this uptake. We don't have kind of the same sort of regulatory market. And I'm not necessarily advocating that's what we need. It's really important that local communities take ownership, as we were talking about before. They take ownership of these spaces where youth and families are, and they protect them, and they find ways to support and grow them. So local decision making is incredibly important, but we need to make it easier so that these incredibly, honestly overburdened, right, teachers and school administrators and district officials have this information at their fingertips. And that's something that we at the Prevention Research Center try to do, right? We provide through EPIS and through the Evidence to Success model, through the Prosper model. These are all different models for building local coalitions to support schools and support community spaces, and providing what we refer to as technical assistance. Technical assistance is almost exactly what it sounds like, which is folks here at the Prevention Center, folks attached to EPIS and some of these other groups actually are on call to help communities not only think about how to select programs, but also how to find the resources to sustain them.
And if you could get more schools to engage, you have a larger data pool by which to assess as a school, as researchers, to determine how effective certain outcomes are based on certain populations. We're a very diverse state.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to remember, is that the Commonwealth is incredibly diverse, right? And even regionally, right, what schools look like in Pennsylvania are not what schools look like in New Jersey or New York or other areas. And it's not what things look like on the West Coast or in the middle of the country. And so the need, once again, for local communities to take ownership and believe that they have that local control is absolutely essential. But what we also need is the support structures, both here in the Commonwealth. We're really lucky to have things like EPIS that's supported through PCCD, but also across the country to have that infrastructure, prevention infrastructure, to support communities in schools and outside of schools be able to select, deliver, and sustain high-quality evidence-based services for youth and their children.
How did COVID complicate or bring greater attention to? They're two different things, but sometimes something bad can create something good.
Absolutely. I think that we cannot overstate the impact of the disruption surrounding the COVID epidemic on the mental health of youth, right? It was incredibly disruptive, incredibly isolating for a lot of youth. And wherever they were in a developmental progression, whether they were young kids, middle schoolers, high schoolers, college age, right? All the way through adulthood, everyone felt this, but they felt it in different ways. And so sometimes kids who missed out on kindergarten didn't learn some of the essential skills, the social and the social skills, the emotional kind of regulatory skills that they need to be able to move forward, and they may still be struggling with it after all this time. Middle schoolers, high schoolers, missed major milestones, a major identity development that was needed, and we have to figure out how to support them, how to engage them in different ways. So you're totally right. It's shown a really not only important light on mental health for youth, but also exacerbated some of the problems that were already existing. But I think because it has shown a light on that, it has made people really take seriously how prevalent this is, right? How, there are many folks still in the country who didn't really understand that kids are not just, mini adults, right? They're developmentally very different, and their risk for trauma, the risk for different mental health problems is different, right, than they may have experienced. And how we talk about it, how we think about it, right, mental health has changed. And we're very fortunate, I think, that we're living in a moment where stigma around getting treatment, right, identifying and recognizing that people might have mental health needs is not as sort of intense, the stigma, as it once was. But at the same time, the problem is there's not enough resources to support the level of need we're experiencing right now.
Yeah, and I think out of that, it used to be suicide prevention was the term. Now terms like suicide ideation, which invites you to wonder what is that ideation. And I'm just simply putting it that way because I think this entire process that you're introducing through your work and your department's work and the chair's work is to get us to think about these things differently as well.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think that we understand a lot more about what mental health and well-being looks like in youth. And there was a time where, where the tragedy of a youth taking their own life was so overwhelming, right, for a community. And we used to do things like talk about and sort of the individual who took their life in ways that actually lifted up, right, this person. And we would have issues, for instance, of like copycat situations, right? And we know now not to do that in that way, that instead we need to be thinking upstream about the resources to help kids. And so you mentioned suicidal ideation, which is one of those risk factors that we often talk about, right? For not just suicide itself, but self-harm, right? Depression, anxiety, right? This is a major marker of a kid who might just need help, right? It's not a marker that there's something biologically wrong, right? That, they're never going to be able to live a normal life, right? It's something that maybe they're going through something, right? And that we, have the tools to support kids. And so it's very important, right? If you yourself are having concerns or thoughts around suicide, or someone that is, to help support them, either yourself or that person getting help. And there's a number of different resources for that.
Part 2 of Eric's conversation with Dr. Max Crowley can be seen right here on the Pennsylvania School Safety Hour 2 weeks from today at 10 a.m. on October 6th on PCN. You don't want to miss it, so mark your calendars.
Northern Pennsylvania Regional College offers a flexible, accessible, and affordable education across 10 counties and 24 locations. NPRC inspires and serves local residents and businesses through associate degrees and workforce training, making education affordable and attainable for students ready to invest in themselves. Learn more today about Northern Pennsylvania Regional College. Brighter futures begin here.
For 911 and emergency first responders, the difference between life and death is often a matter of time. 911, what's your emergency?
Please, hurry!
911 operators and emergency responders count time in seconds. For first responders, getting to the right address and precise location is greatly enhanced by ELS 911 Integrated Emergency Labeling System. ELS 911, as simple as ABC and 1, 2, 3. And for as little as $900 a year, your facility receives a professional wayfinding assessment, facility mapping update, 911 integration, and ELS 911 certification, demonstrating to stakeholders, insurers, and the public that you understand public safety is a matter of time. So don't wait.
2 weeks ago, the town of Winder, Georgia, lost 2 students and 2 teachers when a 14-year-old student entered Appalachia High School with a gun and began shooting. In addition to the 4 killed, more than a dozen others were injured. Pennsylvania School Safety Hour co-host Mike McGrady of MCM Consulting had the chance to discuss the shooting via Zoom with Dr. Beth Sanborn, president of the Pennsylvania Association of School Resource Officers, about the tragedy.
Hello and welcome back. I'm here today with my friend, Dr. Beth Sanborn, and we're going to talk about the recent school shooting in Georgia. Welcome, Beth.
Thanks so much for having me back.
Beth, there's been a tremendous amount of media coverage on this, and a lot of analysis has already come out, but we really, truly don't know what happened. What are your thoughts?
Right now, we're still very numb and raw. It is so very recent, and now is a time to grieve and to allow people to process in their own timeline. So as opposed to any type of finger pointing or discussion about response or failures or anything that may have led up to this, I think what we need to do is to just take a moment to allow the community and the larger community themselves to figure this out amongst themselves. But that being said, as far as information gathering, when we have a concern, you need to have a multidisciplinary group that looks at the information that's gathered. So any one person may know the shooter or may know the shooter's family through that perspective, through those sets of interactions. You know, for example, and I may have mentioned it before, whether or not you act differently when you're around your spouse than you do your boss, or whether you act differently when you're around your children or when you're in a professional environment. And you may, and it's not because you have multiple personalities, but that's the facet of your personality that you choose to show in that moment. So when we see the body cam footage of the officer standing and talking to the child and his father, the child is showing the facet of the personality that they want to show in that moment. Whereas other people who know that shooter may have seen different glimpses of his personality and his interests. So when we're trying to conduct a behavioral threat assessment, we're looking at all of those different pieces. But the only way for us to see those pieces is if we gather all of that information. We collect the dots so that we can connect the dots. But we can't connect them if we don't have them. We collect the information and then follow that path with where the information leads us.
So we know that there were two school resource officers on the scene. One of the officers actually called in the active shooter to dispatch, and they implemented their active shooter response plan. So typically, what would those officers do once they know there's an active shooter in a school?
Well, we are trained to respond as well as react. And the reason why I make a distinction between the two is that responding requires preparation. We don't want to have a knee-jerk reaction to an incident, which would be a response. We want to make sure that we are trained properly so that in the instance where there is a threat or a concern, we can respond appropriately. Now, what concerns me is that after instances like this, you're going to have vendors and you're going to have people coming forward and coming out of the woodworks ready to solve the problem. There will never be another school shooting because I have this product to offer, because I have this setup. And there are metal detectors and there's visitor management system and there's window films and door locks and threat assessment models and tools. And some of these vendors say, like, I can prevent this. And the reality is that no one person, no one product, no one team can stop this. It requires us all to work together, to leave our egos at the door and realize that metal detectors are great when they work in conjunction with and alongside of and multi-layered with, and then insert and fill in those blanks. There's one common thread to all of these tools and these products, though, and that's the human element. We cannot rely solely on technology to solve a problem. We're humans, and therefore some of our behavior is unpredictable. requiring that human element who can pick up on those subtleties of behaviors, of cues, of language, are so incredibly important, so that when we have these other physical tools on our tool belt and in our schools, we can then combine the knowledge and the expertise and the experience of that human. In this particular case, those school resource officers who knew their students, knew the school environment, knew the emergency operations plans, knew how to get in touch with other emergency services, who were then able to engage with the shooter and get him to surrender. Those school resource officers did a tremendous job. And it's that human element of having someone who is professional, having someone who is specifically selected and trained appropriately and properly equipped to be able to do that job.
Thank you, Beth. And you had mentioned a plan, and typically there is a plan in place for the police, the fire, emergency medical services, the 911 center, emergency management, and of course, the school district. Do you want to talk a little bit about like the planning process that takes place, so when an unfortunate incident like this occurs, that you have a good response and hopefully the best outcome possible?
You know, I would love to take credit for this quote, but it's not mine. If you give someone a plan, it collects dust. If you help someone build a plan, it collects fingerprints. And having that ownership and being aware of what your plan entails is an ongoing process. You don't finish it, save it onto your community drive, and then never visit it again. You have to make sure that when you have policies and procedures that are put into place, that your staff and your community, your internal community, are aware of it. They know what to do, and then you practice and you rehearse it, because your mind will not go, or your body will not go where your mind has not been. You have to practice these things. You need to know what to do in the event of an emergency. And typically when we're working with our schools and encouraging these conversations to happen and these trainings, you know, I have found that folks don't get bent out of shape and upset about fire drills. They're just a part of the community. It's just part of what we do. So what I encourage people to do is, you know what, throw a wrench into the works. When you're conducting a fire drill, close off an exit. Close off a door, hold up a sign that says there's a fire here, you can't get out this way, to encourage someone to use that critical thinking and say, well, if we can't go this way, then let's go this way instead. And when it comes to an active shooter, if you suggest to a school community that we're going to practice an active shooter drill, suddenly folks get upset and they get anxious and they get worried. And that critical thinking might go out the window. But if we start off slow and say, listen, you use these same critical thinking skills in a fire drill. What's the difference with an active shooter drill? We need you to think based on the information that you have available in this moment and set the tone of empowerment in schools so that we can empower our students and our teachers to make a decision based on the information that they have available at that time to do what's best and to do what's safest for their kids. You have to practice.
Beth, it's always a privilege and pleasure to talk to you. I think every 2 weeks we see each other now, but I really enjoy it. And, you know, I've been doing this for 38 years, but I learn something every single time that we chat. And I think our viewers actually learn things. And don't forget, viewers, you're more than welcome to send questions in for me, Beth, or anybody on our team that we can answer for you on the air. But thank you very much again.
Thank you. And thank you so much for including PASRO. We truly are invested in our schools, our kids, and our communities, and we love what we get to do.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Northern Pennsylvania Regional College offers a flexible, accessible, and affordable education across 10 counties and 24 locations. NPRC inspires and serves local residents and businesses through associate degrees and workforce training, making education affordable and attainable for students ready to invest in themselves. Learn more today about Northern Pennsylvania Regional College. Brighter futures begin here.
For 911 and emergency first responders, the difference between life and death is often a matter of time. 911, what's your emergency?
Please, hurry!
911 operators and emergency responders count time in seconds. For first responders, getting to the right address and precise location is greatly enhanced by ELS 911 Integrated Emergency Labeling System. ELS 911, as simple as ABC and 123. And for as little as $900 a year, your facility receives a professional wayfinding assessment, facility mapping update, 911 integration, and ELS 911 certification, demonstrating to stakeholders, insurers, and the public that you understand public safety is a matter of time. So don't wait.
Lycoming County is the largest county in Pennsylvania. Tom Marino is its district attorney. Corinne Moon is a prosecutor in that office and an expert on human trafficking. They are with us now in full view.
Hello again, my name is Tom Marino, and I'm the district attorney in Lycoming County, Pennsylvania. And I'm sitting here with Corinne Moon, who is the newest assistant district attorney in my office. Plus, she heads up our division involving sex trafficking of not only children, but older female women who just don't realize what they're getting into. So, Corinne, maybe you want to explain a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Yeah, so I've been working in counter human trafficking for a couple years now, and I've been helping out in Lycoming County as a special prosecutor for a couple years, specifically focusing, as you know, on human trafficking and specifically child sex trafficking in Lycoming County. And, you know, recently we've gotten a lot more cases in the county, as you know. We've filed a lot more charges. We have a couple cases that are actually pending, and in years past, we haven't had any. No. And that hasn't been because we didn't have it. It was because our ADAs and our police, and not by any fault of their own, we just didn't have training on it, you know?
Right.
The lack of knowledge about human trafficking, child sex trafficking, what it really is here in the States, here in Pennsylvania, here in our county, it's just really lacking. But as we've grown in our county and as we've expanded the education, we're now uncovering more stones and seeing what's really underneath, and dispelling some of the myths and the rumors around human trafficking. And being able to do that, we're also able to find the victims faster. We're able to prosecute the traffickers and really get ahead of these crimes.
Yeah. These are complex cases that we're dealing with. Some of it, we have to go back in history of the victim for a long period of time. It's difficult in some situations to track down the criminal in this aspect because there's usually more than one. And when we talk about trafficking, we're talking about any age, a small child, a teenager, an adult female who just as at this point we're getting these victims, particularly the older ones, to understand what is happening to them, because sometimes they realize or don't realize how they're being taken advantage of.
Yeah, a lot of victims, what's really hard about this crime is a lot of victims don't realize that they're victims. They think that, you know, this is a boyfriend and they're doing something because they love them and they're doing them a favor. They're helping to pay rent this month, or, they're groomed slowly over time by their traffickers. This isn't a crime where you meet your victimizer and the next day you're being victimized on the streets. They go slowly in this grooming and indoctrination process so they don't scare them away. And it's really hard, especially in schools, to identify this crime, because the narrative that's been spun around trafficking here in America is that kids are trafficked because they're kidnapped from a shopping center parking lot, or something like that. And it's really hard for teachers and school administration to understand that there could be kids coming to school every single day in their classrooms that are going home and being trafficked at night.
Right. Let's talk about grooming for a moment. We're getting more cases in our office about young girls, young boys being groomed. Mm-hmm. And I know that I have 3 cases on my docket dealing with these individuals who have made friends not only with the victim, but the family.
Yep.
And most of the time, the family does not know what's going on. Mm-hmm. And in all 3 of these cases, there are young teenagers. It's an older male in his late 30s, early 40s, who just take these kids out and take them to dinner and take them shopping, and then start turning them on to alcohol, mm-hmm. start turning them on to marijuana and other drugs, but yet still trying to, and unfortunately, the groomer has the ability to act like he is the protector of that individual.
Yep.
And getting attention to a young girl or young boy, late 12s or 13s, and even perhaps earlier than that, these kids put their faith into this individual and trust them no matter what takes place, even the sexual abuse.
Yeah, and the vast majority of cases of human trafficking are the victim knows their trafficker. These aren't strangers that are taking kids off the streets. They're either related to the victim, or they're known to the family, they're in the community. They develop these relationships and they make their victims reliant on them for, whether that's, like you said, like a sense of security, safety, financially. And it really causes the victim to be hesitant to acknowledge that there's a crime happening, because they don't want their trafficker to get in trouble. They feel protective of them. Maybe that trafficker is providing something to them or their family that they know will go away if they're arrested. And sometimes the traffickers tell them that too, They tell them, if you report this, our love, you can't tell anyone about it. If you report this, I'm going to go to prison. So
that's one other topic that's all part of this. Unfortunately, we're seeing that the abuser, the sexual abuser, the trafficker, built a relationship with a single mother, mm-hmm. Who has a young girl.
Yep.
And they are courting the mother to the extent of the mother thinking they're going to get married.
Yep.
It's happened in 2 of my cases. But that is the segue into sexually abusing the woman's child.
Yeah, the most likely person to abuse a child is the person with the best access, right? And in those cases, someone that's not biologically related to the child, but we do see it with biological parents as well. But in those cases, they're not biologically related to the child. They have unfettered access. They have the best access to the child. And the child knows that if they tell their parent, or if they bring it to light, they're going to break their parent's heart. And sometimes the parents, even when the child discloses, they're hesitant to believe them.
Oh. It's very difficult when we sit down with a child to convince them that they're being taken advantage of, but also in an attempt to bring the mother in, the child just shuts right down.
Yeah, it's so hard for them to be in the presence of them and to say what's happened. They're embarrassed, they're ashamed, they feel bad even.
But there's the groomer actually sets up a competition between mm-hmm. daughter and mother.
Yep.
And then mother and daughter. And they are taking the family for money, mm-hmm. But more importantly and more disgusting is they may be having a sexual relationship with the mother, but they're having more of a very aggressive, aggravating circumstance, sex with a young girl.
That's right, and it tears families apart. How do you come back from that?
It does. Well, we come back and we're this way. We get all the evidence we can, and we put these people in jail for as long as we possibly can. And hopefully that's in the 40 to 60 to 100-year range.
That's right.
We've collected your answers to weeks 1 and 2 homework assignment. Thank you to everyone for your answers. On October 6th, we'll meet the winners of those homework assignments. Here is homework question number 3. In 500 words or less, should students be allowed to bring cell phones into the classroom? Hand in your homework to homework@safetyfirsttv.com by midnight, September 25th. If we read your answer on air, we'll be sending you a Pennsylvania School Safety Hour coffee mug. As Michael always says, coffee tastes better in it. For myself and Michael, thanks so much for watching. Join us again in 2 weeks, right here for the Pennsylvania School Safety Hour on PCN.